Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be giving some final thoughts on this weekend's action in the NFL preseason. As always, every time I enjoy talking about the preseason because football is back and, trying to latch on to whatever you can. Ultimately, the obvious understanding is you can't take anything all too seriously. But there were definitely some things of note that I noticed over the weekend. So if these are your favorite teams, again, you don't need to panic by any means, but some things I definitely noticed. And the first of which was the play of Anthony Richardson, where I think that Richardson is somebody that has definitely become a fan favorite over the course of the past year or so. It started with the pre-draft process going into the 2023 draft, where Richardson was not super experienced at the college level, only, I think under 20 starts total throughout his college career while he was at Florida. And then last year, he came onto the scene, and when he played, he was really electric and showed a lot of promise. That big arm, the legs, all of it put together, that he has the physical tools to, be what the Colts are hoping for long term in terms of being the future of the Colts. And I'm still definitely in on the vision. And I liked what I saw from him from the regular season game. So I'm not going to go back on what I saw in the actual meaningful experience versus the preseason. But I do think that a lot of people are definitely jumping at the bit a little bit to be all in on Anthony Richardson. And I don't know if that is really realistic to imagine. Like our boss just mentioned in a production meeting earlier that fantasy football is not, NFL football, and that's not how we view quarterbacks, is based off of what success they have in fantasy. But Anthony Richardson was number one in terms of quarterbacks for the upcoming year and whatever list that he was looking at. And I think that the hype is just growing so strong for Richardson because, again, the flashes that we've seen have been very impressive. But at the same time, I look at him, I think there's still a lot of rawness in terms of the arm talent. I think he only played on two drives for the Colts against the Broncos on Sunday. But first, I wasn't really all that impressed with either one of them. Just flat out missed a throw when some pressure was put on him on second down of that first drive. On third down, he had all the time in the world, and he almost threw an interception just because the accuracy wasn't there. Second drive ended up stalling out because on third down, he wasn't able to hit his man in stride, and instead he had to slow down for it, allowed the defense to catch up and made the tackle there, short of the line to gain. Now, again, this is 2 drives of preseason. Who cares, really? I'm definitely not going to put all that much stock into it, but it was just a little bit of a reminder that I think everybody kind of has this fantasy of what Anthony Richardson can be in his head, that we're almost just anticipating him being ready immediately. And he was so much better than I possibly thought he would have been headed into immediate action for Indy last season. So by no means am I trying to write him off, but I also just feel like we're jumping at the bit a little bit here, and I think that there could be some real rough spots with Anthony Richardson's game, and the game was just a little bit of a reminder to me that we can't get all too swept up in the excitement. Now, there's a chance he could definitely make me eat my words here, and if that's the case, I'm honestly not going to be all too opposed, because again, I think the physical frame of what he has and everything, I think that archetype of quarterback is so exciting that I'm rooting for it to pan out with him, but I'm just not fully ready to dive all the way into it. But another thing I wanted to talk about, another very young group, is in Pittsburgh, where the Steelers obviously trying to sort of climb themselves out of mediocrity. Last year end up winning, I think it was 10 games, which came as a massive surprise considering the massively inconsistent play at quarterback. So they end up bringing in Justin Fields and Russell Wilson this offseason. We'll see who ends up winning the quarterback battle there. It's actually not the direction I'm going to go here with the Steelers, but with the Steelers, I am looking at their offensive line. And I understand, offensive line is not exactly prime radio, television topics, but I do think that there's a little bit of a concern there in the idea that they're just going to be able to be, one of the best rushing offenses because both Russ and Justin Fields are mobile, and there's a pretty good combination of running backs in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren that things will be able to work out there. But I think I have some real concerns with their offensive line. Whatever was going on there, I'm curious behind the scenes, and I'm sure someone from the Steelers reporters have asked on it. So, if you've seen anything, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments section. But there were the fumbled snaps between Justin Fields and center Nate Herbig to start that game. Curious where things went wrong along those lines. But I am definitely not all that high on Broderick Jones, their first round draft selection from the 2023 class. I think he's been very inconsistent to start his career, specifically in the pass game. He's had his down moments. He actually allowed the pressure that ended up getting Kenny Pickett hurt in that game against Houston last year, I believe it was, in the third quarter. So that was sort of my first introduction to him, and I've been keying on him since. Now, he was playing on both the right side and the left side during this game against Houston on Friday night. So, got to give him credit there that he had a tough responsibility, but I don't think he looks all that good yet, and he's kind of going to be an important part of what is a pretty inexperienced offensive line here. Last thing I'll say on it, because again, I know I've probably gone too long on this conversation, is I did think that Zach Frazier looked really good for the Steelers coming, in with the second unit to replace Nate Herbig. I think he came in the second or third drive, and I thought that he looked really excellent, especially in the run game. I was really impressed with what we saw from him. Thought that Mason McCormick as well, another one of their draft picks from this year on the offensive line. They took him in the fourth round. Thought that both of them looked pretty well, so maybe there's a future there. Again, Broderick Jones kind of concerns me a little bit, and I think that, whatever was going on there, I would probably prefer to see Zach Frazier in the starting lineup, but obviously the Pittsburgh coaches are going to be more on top of that. Do want to acknowledge here, I know I'm going red flags, but shots below the belt, New York Giants 1-0, shining during the preseason. I'll say this, sort of on the other side, I did think that there were a couple things with the Giants that definitely came away as positives for me. I thought that specifically their secondary, which is going to be one of the biggest areas of needs, I think, this year. A lot of inexperience in that secondary. I like their front seven on defense. I think their teams are going to be able to throw on the Giants next year, but between Deonte Banks and Trey Hawkins, one of their cornerbacks that they drafted, I think he was taken late in the 2023 draft, the 6th round then, and it was Tyler Nubin as well, the second round pick from this year, safety out of Minnesota. I thought all of them looked good. I thought the running game looked pretty good as well between Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Eric Gray. So sprinkle some positives in there as well. But the last thing, and definitely not overreacting to it by any means, but the Patriots offense just did not really look right. Their offensive line, I still think, is a massive issue, and obviously this was a poor weather game. It took place on Thursday, and the weather was really bad, so I don't put too much stock into Jacoby Brissett being inaccurate. The drives with Drake May stalling out, they didn't even really let Drake May throw the ball downfield, so they're definitely sort of easing his way into the NFL, but I didn't think that the Patriots offense looked great. And it just isn't a very good unit as a whole anyways. So it's the preseason, but I do feel like we saw last year them really struggle then, and the issues carried into the regular season. And Jacoby Brissett is definitely going to be a more stable quarterback than what the Patriots had last year, and Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. But, you know, it's a pretty low bar from that degree. So Brissett, I mean, I guess we'll have to see, because I do feel like the defense is going to be solid and that the Pats can be, you know, slightly more competitive than people anticipate. I don't have them in the playoff hunt, but I don't think that 5-6 wins is unrealistic for them. And I feel like it's very much going to be dependent on their offense. And Gerard Mayo as well, to some degree, in the overall his management style. So we'll see about that. But, you know, let me know if you had any other takeaways from preseason. Obviously, again, we talk about these things because we're starved for football. Just sort of storylines that I noticed that I didn't feel great about, and I am curious about moving forward here. But we're going to be taking our final break of the show now, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be doing an activity where we build the 2028 U.S. Olympic men's roster. So we will be diving into that, but first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.